You're watching Scriptease. In today's episode, we'll be looking at how to distinguish minor characters in text by examining the script for The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. You can expect minor spoilers for the whole film. Last episode, we looked at how the Coen Brothers created tension in the screenplay for No Country for Old Men. While I was watching the film, I remembered another great skill the Coen Brothers have: the ability to make unique, interesting, and vibrant minor characters. The lady at the trailer park, the service station attendant, and Carla Jean's mother all have tiny amounts of screen time, yet they leave a huge impression on the audience. So how did the Coen Brothers make these minor characters so memorable? I am far from the first person to notice this. Thomas Flight, for example, has a great video on his channel covering exactly this topic. You really should check that out to see how these characters are realized on film. I'll leave a link down below. My line of inquiry, however, lies not in film, but in text. People have highly specific voices and faces, so distinguishing between characters on screen is an almost trivial matter, bar the odd poor casting choice. But in text, it can be easy to jumble up the characters in your mind. A store attendant or clerk can get lost in the haze of courier font, becoming an exposition dump or a means to an end. So my question is, how do we distinguish minor characters on the page? The Coen Brothers excel at this. Nearly all of their films feature an array of side characters that fleetingly interact with the main cast throughout their journey. But their most recent film, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, goes one step further. The film is an anthology, comprised of 6 separate stories set in the American frontier. As such, no story gets more than 20 minutes of screen time, and yet each story is packed with a litany of roles. Each character needs to hit hard and fast to be remembered by the audience. In the film, some amazing casting choices and fantastic performances help to bring these characters to life. But in the script, the Coen Brothers have to rely on strong characterization to implant an image in the reader's mind. Let's look at some of the techniques employed by the Coen Brothers to distinguish their minor characters. Physical appearance comprises a character's most obvious traits. Despite our best efforts, humans are designed to judge a book by its cover. We tend to associate certain physical attributes with certain personalities. A buff person is likely to be hard-edged, while a frail person is likely to be timid. By exaggerating the physical description of someone, we can infer a lot about their personality in a short amount of time. Clarence, from the last story in the film, is described as a burly man, which fits with his role as the thumper in his bounty hunting duo. Age can also quickly indicate a character's personality. An old person could be assumed to be wise or stubborn, whereas a young person could be assumed to be open-minded or naive. Mr. Arthur, a man nearing 60, is set in his ways. His age has made him an expert on surviving the Oregon Trail. He can read the prairie like a book, as Billy Knapp puts it. Similarly, someone's hair and costume can quickly give us a glimpse into their job, their status, or their disposition. Thigpen, being impeccably dressed, adds to his gentleman killer persona, whilst Clarence's too-tight suit visually shows off his bulk, but also indicates he's not quite as smooth as his partner. The trapper's unruly white hair and ill-trimmed mustache is a different style altogether, suggesting he is more accustomed to the wild than civilization. Then we have more obvious ways of making a character stand out. Giving them a highly abnormal feature is sure to make the character distinct in the reader's mind. The central focus of the film's third story has his entire existence defined by one such feature. He has no hands, no arms, no legs. Edwin Horatio Harrison is but head and torso. Even more extreme again, who says the character has to be human? In the 5th story, one of the most impactful characters is President Pierce, a terrier. He has personality, he has wants and needs, he has relationships to the other characters, and, crucial to our discussion here, he stands out. Now, that's not to say you can just chuck a grizzly bear on reception and call it a day, but try keeping an open mind. Maybe we never see the character, they just speak through recordings. Maybe you're telling a sci-fi story, so alien or robotic characters are on the cards. Or maybe it's a fantasy, so you can have creatures that help or hinder your hero. Think outside the box. Beyond a character's physical appearance, we have their behavior. Sometimes a character's personality is explicitly stated, making their behavior one note. This is great when you want the reader of your script to instantly understand what a character is all about. The man Buster Scruggs kills in the saloon is called the Surly Man in the script. Kinda hard to forget which character he is. It doesn't have to be quite so explicit though. The bailiff who arrests the cowboy in the 2nd story is aggressive and domineering, overriding the cowboy's objections. His repetition of the line, "hold your tongue," also sticks him in the reader's head. When someone is constantly interrupting in a scene, they can wear out their welcome, but of course, this character only hangs around for a page. And that brings us nicely to my next point, the character's manner of speaking. Dialogue is an excellent way to express a character's personality. What someone chooses to say, how they choose to say it, and whom they choose to say it to tells us a lot about their nature. In the case of a minor character, a crude approach rather than a subtle one can quickly establish the type of person they are. Accents, for example, tell us where someone's from, what class they belong to, or what upbringing they might have had. The final story in the film makes full use of this technique. The bounty hunters, Thigpen and Clarence, have British and Irish accents respectively, which are described to us both in action text and through how their dialogue is written. The Frenchman's accent is there, shown in lines like this,
It's through practice. You did not know him?
but it's downplayed. Compare this to the Frenchman from the first story, where the accent is hyper-exaggerated.
The other hombre answered.
If all of the Frenchman's lines from the last story were written like this, it could wear on the reader's patience as they laboriously decode the Frenchman's accent. A person's word choice also speaks volumes about their character. Going back to Thigpen, he has a large vocabulary and speaks proper. He uses words like emolument, a word that the trapper across from him would never use. The trapper's vocabulary is far simpler, mostly limited to rodent-related ramblings.
Helped me to gather that people are like ferrets or a beaver.
And of course, there's how much someone chooses to say. Some characters just won't shut up, like the drover who comes across the cowboy tied to the tree. He chews the cowboy's ear off and 90% of the time he's on screen about a not-so-interesting anecdote.
That's what you call a foul-weather friend, I tell you.
Other characters, like the coach driver, won't say a word, which intensifies his dark nature. The physical side of behavior is hard to convey in script form. Body language is often invented by the actor to match their role, created anew to suit their character. Minor characters rarely carry enough importance to have specific physical behaviors explained in the script. You might get something like the cigar-chomping piano player, or the man who kills the prospector, then slowly rolls a cigar and takes a puff. The exception to this is when the physicality of the character is essential to their scene. The crazy way the bank teller draped in pants gallops out to the cowboy adds to the oddity of his character, forming a bizarre image. Behavior is such a broad category that I could hardly go over every detail of it, but hopefully you've gotten the main idea. A particularly fun way to mess with appearance and behavior is to make them contradict one another. As stated earlier, we expect a big guy to be a rough character, yet Clarence proves to be quite the opposite, a gentle giant if you will. Despite his business of thumping bounties, he takes the lady's hand to calm her. He then gives a stirring rendition of a folk song, his voice bringing the coach's occupants to tears. Finally, another great way to distinguish minor characters is altering their place in the story. How the character relates to the plot, setting, and other characters can drastically affect how they are perceived by the audience. The more ingrained a character is in the plot, the more memorable they'll be. If the character's actions are woven into the story, the reader can't forget about them without unraveling a series of events. For example, Buster Scruggs is built up for most of the story as being freakishly skillful, taking down his opponents with flair and ease. Then, the kid comes along and takes him out like it's nothing. Anime fans could call this the kite effect. Still hurts me to talk about. My point is, the kid's actions are essential to the plot, and therefore when remembering the film, the viewer is forced to remember the kid. The kid also exemplifies another great way of making a character memorable, their introduction. An interesting introduction creates intrigue around the character. The young man who kills the prospector first appears as a shadow over him. Then we cut to a different angle to reveal him as an out-of-focus figure. This taps into something primal in the reader, an ambiguous threat. The young man becomes instantly menacing. We can also typify a character's personality via their association with other characters. Alice, for example, is largely talked over and domineered by her brother Gilbert in the opening scene for the 5th story. This paints her as rather meek, easily influenced by others. Conversely, we learn a lot about Gilbert's character posthumously from Alice. The way she talks about him, calling him hard-nosed but never very successful. Gilbert seemed assertive, yet his relationship with Alice reveals to the audience that he was actually rather foolish. Contrasting with other characters highlights your minor character's unique traits. For example, juxtaposing a talkative character with a quiet character amplifies the effect of both traits. The cowboy isn't necessarily a serious character, but when you place him next to the crazy teller at the bank, he comes off as incredibly intense. Different dispositions also help create conflict between your characters, and conflict means drama. For the most part, contrast is your friend. Now, I know I've breezed by a lot of examples, so unless you're sitting there diligently taking notes, you've probably forgotten half of what I've said. Let's look at one character in the film that covers nearly all the techniques we've looked at today: Buster Scruggs. Buster Scruggs opens the film with a gripping introduction. Amongst the red sandstone, we hear Scruggs approaching while singing a jaunty tune. He leisurely plays his guitar on horseback, seemingly impervious to the heat and dust around him. This idea is reinforced by Scruggs' costume. His white clothes and 10-gallon hat are blindingly clean. His horse, Dan, matches Scruggs' carefree attitude, bright white to match his rider's outfit, and responding to Scruggs' questions on cue. Then, as if this weren't enough to elevate Scruggs above his setting, he breaks the fourth wall and addresses the camera directly. His first narration reinforces the image we've already built for Scruggs. He is incredibly folksy and charming, and his positive outlook instantly endears the reader to him. This exaggerated personality not only makes him memorable, but will contrast heavily with the miscreants he meets throughout his story. Scruggs' southern charm comes across mostly in his manner of speaking. He uses unusual words like cognoments and fiddle, plus unusual phrases like the human material and the day's measure of hoofclops. He also has an abbreviated manner of speaking where he blends words together, like himmet or yolov. It's incredibly colloquial, which puts the audience at ease. He also tends to speak quite a lot, which, because of his charm, is entertaining. Compare this to the trapper in the final story, who comes off as rather tedious. Once the Coen Brothers have successfully painted Scruggs as likable, they then undermine this persona by revealing that he's kind of an awful person. He's arrogant, he's a criminal, he's a ruthless killer, and after killing the surly man in the saloon, he literally bursts into song about it, even while the dead man's brother weeps. This contradiction makes Scruggs an interesting character. At first we cheer for him and his over-the-top violence, but we're then made to feel guilty for glorifying him, as he toys with the surly man's brother, blasting off his fingers. In total, Scruggs only gets about 15 minutes of screen time, but for all the reasons just stated, he sticks in your mind even until the end of the film. With minor characters, you have to have a strong impact in a short amount of time. Quite often, minor characters are an afterthought. They're used to fill gaps or mediate exposition. But think of it this way. You're wasting a huge opportunity by not utilizing your minor characters to their fullest. A minor character can reinforce the film's theme. They can build on the mood of a film, or, conversely, provide respite from the mood to reset your audience. Maybe you could use them as an obstacle to your protagonist's progress, providing conflict whilst illuminating another side to the protagonist's personality. Most importantly though, make sure your minor characters feel real. Like any character, they should have their own desires, personalities, and predilections. They might be relatively simple compared to your main characters, but even a simple character is better than no character at all. Using the techniques presented here as a jumping off point, hopefully you can carve out some unique minor characters of your own. Good writing and good luck.